Welcome to this timely and I hope interesting session. My name is Udo Jude Ilo. I am the CEO of the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law. And I'm excited to be here with you today. More than 3 million children die every day across the world. In a year, we record 3 million deaths related to hunger. This would translate to a death of a child every 15 seconds. So let that sink in. We're here today to address one of the most defining challenges of our time, ending extreme poverty by 2030. While progress has been made, no doubt, the goal remains elusive, and the urgency to act is even greater. Poverty is not just lack of income. It is a multidimensional crisis rooted in inequality, exclusion, weak governance, absence of rule of law, conflict, and leadership failure. It is a systemic issue that entrenches suffering, limits opposition, and fuels a cycle of instability across the world. It does not occur in a vacuum, really. It is sustained and multiplied by barriers, which include inequality. So we looked up some interesting statistics. The world's richest 1% control nearly 46% of global wealth, while nearly 700 million people still live in extreme poverty. Economic gains are not distributed. Marginalization is a problem, and of course, women and children are most vulnerable to the harsh realities of poverty. The absence of rule of law, poor governance, conflicts, political instability is also exacerbating this problem. Over 80% of this world's poorest people live in fragile and conflict-affected areas. And of course, the problem of exclusion. Poverty disproportionately affects marginalized groups across the world. I'm talking about women, refugees, people with disabilities, and indigenous communities. Lack of access to education is a huge problem that is exacerbating poverty. Now, it is not just a moral problem. It is a humanitarian crisis. But it is also a huge security threat that affects both the global south and the global north. Poverty breeds instability. Instability knows no borders. And as long as there is poverty anywhere in this world, none of us can actually claim to be safe. And so we have to do something. Wealthier nations must do more, but poorer countries need to also fix their systems. But all of this thing, in my view, must be rooted in a system of justice that allows people to thrive, that is inclusive, that shares opportunities and protects potentials. And to have the conversation about how to get out of this logjam and how to solve this problem, I have a very, very, very eminent group of professionals. We have on stage Mousa Ahmad Agha, president of the Barzani Charity Foundation. Mousa has been very, very fundamental in addressing issues of poverty for orphans, widows, refugees, people in need in Iraq and other neighboring countries, looking on how to improve the lives of low-income earners. Mousa, you're welcome. Next to him is Clint Borgen, CEO of the Borgen Projects, an NGO that works to end global poverty by focusing on foreign policy. Interestingly, Clint's journey to Damascus moment was in 1999, while working as a young volunteer in refugee camps during the Kosovo War and genocide. He recognized then the need for an organization that could bring U.S. political attention to issues of severe poverty. And Clint, we're excited to have you here with us. Next to Clint is Heidi Kühn, founder of Root for Peace, author, World Food Laureate for the excellent work she did in Afghanistan. Heidi, we're glad to have you with us. And to all of you here, welcome. We will make this as interactive as possible, but first, let us start off with a keynote address from Mousa. Just to say that Mousa will speak in Arabic and in Kurdish. My apologies, please. He will speak in Kurdish and then we will provide translation. And after that, we will start off the conversation with the panelists responding to his presentation. You have the floor, sir.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. And I first of all apologize for everyone, audience and my co-panelists for using a translator to convey my message because I can't speak very well English.
همو إنسانك بتعبتي أواني كلا كيسي مروي إشيان كردوا كجويان لا چنكي هجاري دبيتن همو جانيان دلارسي.
Of course, if everyone, especially for those who are working on to the end in poverty or preventing the poverty, it's a very tragic concept. And whoever heard the word of poverty, obviously, it's a very tragic and it's kind of shaking everyone's in the soul and heart.
هجاري كارساتكي جوريا وبراستي تا استاش نتوان راوا كنترول بكريت.
Poverty is a tragic that so far has not been controlled and has not been prevented.
اما زانين ك هنگاوی زور هاوش راوا بو چاره سرکردنی او کیشه و اجزانین که هوکارکانی لشوینک و بو شوینک جوازیان هست.
And we obviously know there is a lot of step has been taken by various different actors to prevent or to end the poverty, and then also at the same time the poverty from one region or one place to another can have a different meaning and different dynamic.
اوانی که او هوکارانی که ل روشالاتی نواراسن جوازن اوانی که ل افریقیا.
The reasons that have obviously increased or have obviously created the poverty in the Middle East may have been different to somewhere else, in example in Africa.
اوانی که ل ولاتی وکو عراق و سوریا هن جوازن لوی که ل بنگلاديش و ل میانمار.
The reasons for the poverty in Iraq in the Middle East can be very different from Bangladesh and Myanmar.
بۆی شەبەڕاستی من هەوڵ دەدەم وشەکان چڕ بکەمەوە بە تایبەتیش لەو شوێنانەی کە ئێمە بە مەیدانی لە مەیداندا ئیشمان کردووە لەسەر بابەتی.
Therefore, I just want to have my keynote speech to be really minimum to the areas that we have worked and then to be very constructive.
لە ساڵانی ڕابردوو ئێمە هەمومان دڵخۆش بوون چکو هەوڵێک هەبوو هەوڵدانێک هەبوو مای دڵخۆشی بوو لەسەر هەژاری کە ئیش دەکرا بە تایبەتیش ئەو دەرئەنجامانەی کە لە چاینا لە هیندستان هەبوون لەوەی لە کەمکردنەوەی ڕێژەی هەژاری کە دوو وڵاتی زۆر گەورەنە و هەنگاوی باشیان هاوش بە وڵاتانی تریش.
We all eagerly and witnessed and we have seen that the work were conducted by international community for ending the poverty, example in China and India and somewhere else. It was very optimistic at the time.
بەڵام بەداخەوە کۆڤید ئەو ئومێدانەی زۆر لاواز کرد بە تایبەتیش کە لە ماوەیەکی کەم دایمە بینیمان زیاتر لە 100 ملیۆن کەوتە ژێرهێلی هەژاری بەهۆی کۆڤید.
Unfortunately, and everyone was saddened by the arrival of COVID, which have really had a huge impact on the project of ending the poverty, and then with a very short period of time, not just decrease of the poverty, but rather 100 million more people were added to the poverty line of the internationally.
هەر بۆ کورتکردنەوەی قسەکان ئەمەوێ تەرکیز لەسەر عێراق و لەسەر سووریا بکەم.
So to focus and shorten the conversation, I want to focus on Iraq and Kurdistan.
کە بەداخەوە ئەمەوێ قسەیەک بێنمەوە کە ئەڵێ لە هەر شوێنێک قەیرانێکی گەورەی هەژاری هەیە فەشەلێکی سیاسی لە پشتە بەداخەوە.
Fortunately, there is obviously a theoretical concept. They say wherever the humanitarian crisis exists, then it's been a failure of the political system of that region or that country.
ئەوەی کە ئێمە بینی ومانە دەرئەنجامی ئەو هەژاریە بۆ شەڕ دەدەن.
So the reason the impact of the poverty we have seen in our region was actually going back to the failure of the political system.
سووریای 2011 وێڕای ئەوەی کە حکومێکی دیکتاتۆری هەبوو ئێستاش کەس خۆزگە بەو حکومەڕە نایەڵێ بەڵام ژمارەی نسبەی هەژاری 13%.
For instance, in Syria, even there was a harsh, very brutal dictatorship was existing, was a very authoritarian regime were ruling the people, and which nobody really wished for the Assad regime for any shape and form. However, the poverty then was less than what is right now.
ئێستا بەداخەوە نسبەی هەژاری لەوێ زیاتر لە 80%.
Unfortunately, right now, as we speak, there is 80% of the people in Syria actually living in the poverty line.
هەروەها بە هەموو پێوەرێکی هەڵسانگاندنی ئابووری دەبێ عێراق یەکێ لەک وڵاتانە بێت کە هاوکاری وڵاتانی هەژار دەکەن.
By all the statistics and evaluation, Iraq should be a more prosperous country and be a donor instead of being a country with the poverty.
بەو پێ کە 22 لە زەویەکانی زەوی کشت و کاڵین.
For that is example in Iraq is 22% of the Iraqi land actually is agricultural, which is.
و لە هەمان کاتدا ڕۆژانە زیاتر لە 300 ملیۆن بەرمیل ڕەوانەی دەرەوە 3 ملیۆن بەرمیل.
And then in a daily basis, Iraq also is obviously export 3 million plus of barrel of oil.
بەڵام ئێستا نسبەی هەژاری 25% لە.
Despite all of that, is right now Iraq is 25% of the Iraqi population live under the poverty line.
ئێمە ئەگەر باس لە نسبەی هەژاری بکەین لە هەموو دنیادا لەو دوو وڵاتە بە تەنها زیاتر لە 30 ملیۆن کەس لە ژێرهێڵی هەژاری.
So if you talk about the poverty internationally, but if you take the concept of Iraq and Syria, you put the two countries, more than 30 million people are living in poverty.
ئەمەوەی ئەزمونێکی گچکەی خۆمان باز بکەین.
I just want to talk about a very small example of our own work.
زۆر بەلاوامانە گرنگەوە کە لە داهاتوودا هەم وڵاتانی گەورە و هەمیش UN تەرکیز لەسەر مەوزوعی ڕێکخراوەکان بکەن چۆن ئەتوانن پەریان پێ بدەن.
It's very important to us and it's very interesting for us to convey the message and then to let the international community know how to really empower and promote the local NGOs and local organizations in every countries and region.
ئەگەر قسەکانم کورتتر بکەمەوە ئێمە لە عێراقدا دەژین ئێمە لە هەرێمی کوردستانی عێراقدا دەژین.
If I minimize my speech, we live in Iraq, but rather we are living in the Kurdish part of Iraq, known as the Kurdistan region.
ئەم فیدرالیای لە عێراق هەیە لەسەر بنەمای نەتەوە لەسەر بنەمای نەتەوەدا بەش کراوە هەرێمی کوردستان و ناوچەکانی تر ناوچەی عەرەبی.
The political system obviously established, which is the federalism based of the sectarian, which is divided and is a division between two ethnic groups in Kurd in the north and then south, the Arabs.
سەرەڕای ئەوەی کە داهاتی سەرەکی بە تایبەتی شناردنی نەفت لە دەست حکوومەتی مەرکەزیدایە بەڵام نسبەی هەژاری لە هەرێمی کوردستان کەمترە لە 8% بە بەراورد لە عێراق کە 25%.
Despite the centralization of the revenue of Iraq, which also the central government of Iraq responsible for importing and then also marketing the oil, but despite this is a large amount of revenue Iraq has, the poverty, obviously the proportion of the poverty in Kurdistan region is less than in the central part of Iraq.
لاوانەیە هەمومان پێمان وا بوو بێت کە کێشەی داعش کۆتایی پێ هاتووە بەڵام هێشتاش کێشەکە هەیە و ئێمە لە شەڕی داعشیشدا هەرێمی کوردستان باجێکی زۆری دا.
Many obviously outsiders outside of the region, they believe or they think that the war against ISIS already ended.
ئەو هەرێمە 6 ملیۆنیە پێشوازی لە 2 ملیۆن پەنابەر و ئاوارە کرد کە ئەمە شتێکی یعنی کێشەیەکی زۆر گەورە بوو بەڕاستی.
During the ISIS war we paid a heavy price as a Kurdish region and then in a very small geographical area of the Kurdish part of Kurdistan we obviously host 2 million plus refugees from all over the Iraq as well as outside of Iraq.
ڕاستە وڵاتانی هاوکاری بەخش UN لەگەڵ ئێمەدا بوو بەڵام ئەرکی گەورە کەوتە سەر حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان و خەڵکەکەی.
It is true and correct to say the international community, especially the UN agencies, they were partnered with us, but the heavy burden was on the shoulder of the host community in Kurdistan.
ئەوان نەیانهێشت کە کێشەیەکی گەورەی ئابووری و مردنی حاڵەتی مردن و نەخۆشی بەربەڵاو بەڵاو ببێتەوە لەناو ئەو ئاوەڕە. بەڵێ.
But despite of this harsh condition and then a very short of, let's say, the minimum of the effort was made by international community, the Kurdish people in the host country, as a host nation, did not let refugees and IDPs to be obviously starved to death or any tragic things happened through because of the poverty and lack of the necessity.
کوردەکان توانیان وەکو وێزگەیەکی لێ بکەین بۆ ئەو ئاوارانە ئەو هەرێمی کوردستان بۆ ئەوەی پەنا بۆ ئەوروپا وڵاتانی تریش نەکەن. ئەمە وای کرد ئەو خەڵکە لەوێ بمێنێتەوە.
Kurdistan was obviously managed and maintained the central point for the refugees to their life to be safe and then to protect it from against all odds, and also was prevented refugees to travel further to Europe and seek asylum in European countries.
من دەمەوێت دیسان بچووکتر بکەمەوە قسەکانم مەودای قسەکردن و تەرکیز لە قسەکانی جەنابیان بکەمەوە کە چۆن ئێمە ئەتوانین بە هەماهەنگی لەگەڵ یەکترکردندا کێشەی هەژاری کەمتر بکەین.
So it's my point. I also want to minimize it again and go back to your point. Is the question is how we gonna end or try to end the poverty worldwide.
ئەیەکێ لەو پرۆژانەی کە ئێمە ئیشمان تێدا کرد منداڵانی بێباوک و داک.
What we have done within our organization in our region is we work with the orphan kids.
بە پێی داتاکانی UN عێراق 5 ملیۆن منداڵی بێداک و باوک.
According to the UN data, Iraq have a 5 million plus of orphans right now.
ئێمە پرۆژەیەکمان وەرگرت کە بە هاوکاری لەگەڵ خەڵکی دەوڵەمەند چۆن دەتوانین هاوکاری ئەو خانەوادانە.
We obviously established a project in cooperation and sponsorship with the local businesses, how we could maintain and then provide the need for the orphans in our region.
20,000 خانەوادە لەناو ئەو پرۆژەدا تا ئێستا سوودمەند.
Since then and then as we speak, continuously 20,000 families have benefited and continuously they benefit from the project we have created for orphans.
کە ئەمە پرۆژەیەکی زۆر کاریگەر بوو.
And this was obviously very impactful. It was a very significant project.
هەم دیسان کۆمەڵی پرۆژەی بچووکتر هەبوونە کە ئێمە ئیشمان لەسەر کردووە چارەسەرکردنی کێشەکە بە شێوەیەکی بنەڕەتی.
But also then we extended our effort with this very small project, various different, very diverse and dynamic projects to solve not the short-term but the long-term issues among the people who are vulnerable people.
زۆر گرنگە ئێمە هەموو لایەکمان گرنگی بەو پێکەوە بەستنەوەیە بدەین و گرنگی بەو لایەنە بدەین چۆن خەڵکی دەوڵەمەند یان خەڵکێک کە دەوڵەمەندیش نەبێت بەڵام ژیانێکی باشتری هەبێت هاوکاری ئەو خەڵکە بکە خەڵکی.
So it is very important for all of us really to connect or rather reconnect and diversify the effort between the, let's say, the more prosperous and richer people, not necessarily the only rich people, but the people who could afford to look after and then help others who are in need.
بەداخەوە ئەوەی کە ئێستا ڕوو دەدات لە ڕۆژهەڵاتی ناوەڕاست جێی دڵخۆشی نییە.
Unfortunately, what's going on right now in the Middle East is not very, it's very pessimist.
ئێمە ئەوە دوو ڕۆژە لێرەین قسەی زۆر خۆشمان گوێ لێ دەبێت لەسەر پێشکەوتنەکانی تەکنۆلۆژیا و هەموو ئەو بابەتانەی کە لێرەن پەرەدان بە دیموکراسیات بە بابەتەکانی تری ژیان.
The last 2 days, obviously, we heard a lot of positive note from everyone, especially with the rising of the new technology and then also the democracy.
ئێمە هێستا خەڵکێکمان سەر دەبڕێت خەڵکێکمان شوون بزر دەکرێت بە پارە دەفرۆشرێت ئەوەی کە داعش کردی بەسەر.
But yet still there is our people in our region still been abducted, is been beheaded, is been sold as a sex slave or as a slave, especially by ISIS Daesh.
ئێمە هەر لە چیرۆکەکان لە گێڕانەوەکانی سەدەکانی ڕابردوو گوێمان لێ دەبوو لەوەی کە مرۆڤێک دەستا و دەستی پێ دەکرێت ئافرەتێک دەفرۆشێت لەو دەستەیەوە بۆ ئەو دەستە بەڵام ئێستا بە واقعی لەو ناوچەیە ڕواندا.
We used to obviously in the history we were learning from the history book from the past narrative that there were people who were being slaved and were being handed over from one sector to another, from one agency to another. However, sadly in the 21st century we witnessed this is in our own region and our own people has been obviously abducted, sold and been slaved by other organization and systematically.
هەر دەبێ بڵێم جارێکی تریش بەداخەوە ئێمە جگە لە کێشەی شەڕ کە کێشەیەکی بەردەوامە وەکو ئاماژەم پێدا هۆکاری سەرەکی هەژاریە لە ناوچەکەدا ئێمە ئێستا گۆڕانکاریەکانی کێش و هەواش عێراق یەکێکە لە ئەو وڵاتانەی کە کاریگەری زۆری دەبێت لە دەوڵاتە یەکەمەکە.
As I mentioned before, obviously the conflict and war is the seed, or rather it's the bedrock of all the poverties and then all the instability. However, there is an addition to that also in our region now we are facing also the climate change and the environmental impact, which is also is very impacted on the people.
بۆی کاتی زۆر نەگرم قسەکان لەوە چڕ دەکەمەوە لە کۆتاییەکەیدا کە سەرەڕای ئەو بارودۆخەی شەڕ و ئەو نەهامەتیانەی کە هەن بەڵام دەکرێت ئومێدی وەکو دەستگا هەبن کە بتوانن بەشێک ئەگەر بەشێکی بچووکیش بیت بەڵام بە هەماهەنگی و هاوکاری زیاتر ئێمە ئەو کارانە زیاتر بکەین لەوەی کە خەڵک لە هەژاری ڕزگار.
So I want to finalize my note by not taking further time from you. We believe that the coordination, cooperation between individual, society, as well as organization, international community really can contribute to rather a further prosperity and instability. And then we believe that the cooperation, working together in every region as well as ours, will have an impact for helping reducing the poverty and then improving the life of everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can we please give him a round of applause, please? So I think this is a very good starting point for us. Four clear points came out clearly. One is the failure of political systems, because he did say that on a very good day, Iraq should be exporting food and giving arms and giving aid to other countries. But we're in a situation where the country can barely feed itself. The second thing is the consequences of conflict, how that has made it difficult for the country to leverage the farmlands and the agricultural opportunities that are available to the country. The third point is that poverty is a human construct. With what we have available to us, we should be fine. But because we've not harnessed it very well, then we get into a situation where what we have is not enough for everybody. And finally, the point he made about cooperation across regions, across countries, and globally to tackle this problem. And now I come to you, Heidi. At the beginning, I had mentioned, and let me clarify, 3 million children die every year, not every day. Every year because of poverty. And the UN developmental goal is interested to end poverty by 2023. And I want the starting question, given what we've heard, and these statistics about people who are dying of hunger annually, do you think that this 2030 goal is still achievable? And if not, what should we do?
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you and to be among this very distinguished and very serious audience. My name is Heidi Kühn. I'm founder of Roots of Peace and a recipient of the World Food Prize. But these are not awards to put on a shelf right now. The world is in crisis. And I have walked the minefields of the world for the past 25 years. I'm a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 7. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the women and the children who have no voice. We live in a world today where there's an estimated 110 million landmines silently poised in the earth we've been given to nurture in 60 countries. And as the world has witnessed the war escalating in Ukraine, 30% of the agricultural farmland is riddled with these insidious seeds of destruction silently buried, tempting the innocent footstep of a child or a farmer, or perhaps the only cow that provides the milk for the family. This is in real time. I know it takes 8 pounds to give birth to a child. It takes 8 pounds to detonate a landmine. And I have been passionate about turning minds into vines, making that correlation and that connection to the earth in which our footsteps walk. And if I were to, I'm an optimist, I wouldn't be going back to Afghanistan and Angola and Zimbabwe and Vietnam. Vietnam was the war of my generation. Yet 80% of the land in Quang Tri province remains riddled with landmines, land that potentially grows agriculture. If we are going to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, we must stop and pause for a moment and remind ourselves as humans, we have made grave mistakes. And I believe that we need to bring forth the 18th Sustainable Development Goal, the eradication of landmines from the face of this earth. For we cannot achieve no poverty when the land is held hostage by landmines. There is no justice when a farmer goes out into a field, and women cannot get an education. They're walking to their well. The flowers bloom. The children pick the flowers. Mothers around the world, boom. The footsteps that we have here in Berlin are more important than they have ever been. Outside the cement walls is the Berlin Wall fell. That defined my generation. And I think this is a moment to build bridges, not just remind ourselves of the wall taking down, but in the beautiful country of Kurdistan, as I was researching that today, between 15 and 25 million landmines are planted in the ground as a result of war. Bordering Turkey, bordering Iraq, bordering Armenia. Yet the land is fertile, agricultural land. And as I've witnessed in Afghanistan, by working with professional demining groups, the removal of the landmine, the planting of the fruit tree, feeds future generations. But it also, the planting of a tree sequesters the carbon that's going to fight the climate crisis. So tomorrow is Nowruz, your new year. And a few days later, it's the first day of spring. Let's bring forth from the World Forum when we leave these walls and go back to our respective countries. Let's bring forth a spring offensive like never before. May we lead with the shovel rather than the gun. And in the words of the Isaiah prophecy, respected by Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike, may they beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, so that nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. This is the spring. We reap what we sow. Let's plant billions of fruit trees all over the planet. It is possible, leading with a shovel and not the sword.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I love the optimism to what you said, because frankly, sometimes it's difficult to be optimistic about these things. And Clint, I come to you. You work in the policy space. And what policy shifts should we be thinking about at this point to ensure poverty reduction? How do we expand the opportunities for economic prosperity for everyone?
Yeah. I think if everyone takes away one thing today, these issues, we talk about poverty, extreme poverty, they can be addressed. There's a record of them being addressed. If you go back from 1990 to 2005, hunger was cut in half globally. There's, go down the list, access to education, more kids are in school now than any time period in history. You can look at a variety of these issues, all fall in the category of poverty. And there's been great progress. For sure, COVID has been a setback, huge setback at the moment. My country, with the current government, is doing drastic cuts to the largest humanitarian agency, USAID, in the world. And that's going to have really negative ramifications. But just if you take away one thing today, these issues are addressable. Helping people who have absolutely nothing is not that complicated. It's just a matter of getting the resources from the places that do have the resources to people on the ground who can then have the tools to lift themselves out of poverty. And that's one thing to take away. Other thing is there's actual cost estimates now. What is the cost of ending world hunger? The UN puts out those estimates. Just to give you an idea, at that time, so it was 2021, they estimated about an additional, from what the world was already spending, if an additional $40 billion per year was allocated to ending extreme poverty, hunger, that could be done. So that the knowledge is there, the expertise is there. What has been really a struggle is the political incentive, I'd put it that way, right? So political leaders, I'm out in the United States, they hear a lot from their constituents on various issues, but there hasn't traditionally been a strong advocacy around humanitarian issues, and that's kind of the void we've attempted to fill, and where we've had success in passing specific legislation, things like access to clean water, girls' education, and working with poor farmers to increase their crop productivity. So there's a lot of different ways to improve conditions. It gets into everything from improving girls' education. Landmines is a wonderful one. I'm personally very familiar with that one. I go to a lot of these countries, and it's scary to walk in a lot of these places. Like you go to some of these war zones, and so stuff like that you don't always take for granted here. But big picture, these issues are addressable. It's just getting that political will to do so.
So we can address this problem. We have the resources, 40 billion every year. It's less than the money we spend on defense.
By far, my country spends upwards of 800 billion on
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not happening.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why it's not happening is that we don't see the risk. We think that when we invest money in kinetic military hardwares, that is security enough. But of course, clearly, poverty is the biggest threat because of the things it can create, extremism and all of it. And when there's poverty, then all of us are endangered. Why are the leaders not hearing this? Why is it still difficult for us to understand the link between poverty eradication and our safety and security in all parts of the world? And I'll start with you, Mousa.
بەڕاستی زۆر گرنگە ئێمە پەنا بۆ پلاتفۆرمی جۆراوجۆری ئەو هات ببین بۆی ئەو تێگەیشتنە دروست بکرێت.
I think it's very important, it's very imperative to really utilize and benefit from a platform like this today and then be more involved and participate so that everyone to have this understanding you are referring to.
هەمومان گەشتبین بووین بەوەی کە جیهان بچوو کرایتەوە بە پێشکەوتنانەی تەکنۆلۆژیا کە تو زۆر بە ئاسانی دەتوانی کێشەیەکی حتا ئەگەر بچووکیش بیت لە چ شوێنێکی دنیا بێت لە ڕۆژێکدا بیبین.
Of course, all of us were very optimistic. We were very happy that the new era of the technology where the globalization is come to into a very small village where if the problem in one side of the corner of the world, you can't solve it in other part of it, which was a good thing.
بۆیە مای هەڵوەستە لەسەرکردنە مای دیراسەتکردنە تۆ چۆن مرۆڤێک بی و چاوت بۆ مرۆڤانە بکەوێت کە زۆر ئەتوانی بەشێک لەو کێشانە ئەگەر چەندیش بچووک بی چارەسەر بکەیت بەڵام هەڵوێستت نەکەیت.
But it's very important that as a human being and nothing else, put the politics aside, as a human being, when you see there is a crisis in one part or corner of the world, there is a problem, then you have no narrative, you have no emotion to solve it. I think this is something that has to be really noted.
لەوە نەخۆشتر ئەوەیە کە ئەو بیرکردنەوە دەگاتە ئاستی سەرۆکانی وڵاتانی دنیا.
And to make it worse, sometimes the ignorance of this idea of not to solve the problem sometimes can be seen from the top leadership internationally.
ئەمە قسە تاکید لەسەر قسەکانی جەنابی بکەمەوە کاریگەریەکانی نەمانی پرۆژەکانی USA.
I just want to really support your speech that the ending the US aid internationally have a huge impact.
ئێمە هەمومان لەگەڵ تەنزیمکردنین لەگەڵ ڕێکخستنین لەگەڵ ئەوەینە کە ئەو پرۆژانەیان ئەو هاوکاریانەی کۆ دەکرێنەوە بە شێوازێکی زۆر شەفاف بە بەرنامە پێشکەش بە خەڵکی هەژارەکەی بکرێت.
Of course we are very much eager to see and we are a supporter of the idea of reorganization, better cooperation, the transparency, and everything else that we talk about. Of course, it's very important to have the project that they funded to have a bigger impact.
بەڵام بەڕاستی قەتعکردنی بەو شێوازەیە هیچ خزمەتێکی مرۆڤاتی ناکە خزمەتی وڵاتانی خۆشیان ناکە.
However, it's a shutting the pipe or ending the entire aid of the humanitarian doesn't really help and wouldn't really serve the humanity at all.
بۆیە ڕەنگ بێ زۆر گرنگ بێت لەناو ئەوەی کە ئێستا لێرە دەکرێت دووبارە لە شوێنی تر بە شێوازی تر ئێمە بکەین بۆی ئەو پەیامە بگەینین بە خەڵک کە زرورە پەیوەندیمان لەگەڵ یەکتر هەبێت هاوکاری یەکتر.
In my view, what we are doing today, in the last 2 days as well as right now, I think this should be the same model to be really repeated in somewhere else, and then this should go on and on, on and on. So then the understanding about how to really solve the poverty or helping each other can be really understood, and then the better collaboration and cooperation can be formed.
ئەرکی ئێمەش قرسە وەکو ئەو منەظەماتانەیان ئەوانەی کە نوێنەراتی ئەو کێسە دەکەن چۆن هەژار و دەوڵەمەند بگەین یەکتر.
Of course, it's for us as an organization, and I think it's for every organization who are working in the same field of humanitarian work. One of the challenges is how can we connect the more prosper individual to the people who are really in need.
ئێمە چەند ئەرکمان هەیە لە گەیاندنی ئەو هاوکاریە یان چارەسەرکردنی کێشەی خەڵکەکە ی هەژارەکە ئەوەندەش ئەرکمان هەیە لەوەی کە ئەو تێگەیشتنە دروست بکەین بۆ ئەو کەسانەی کە ئیمکانیاتیان هەیە ئەوڕ لەو خەڵکە بدەن.
I think we have a dual responsibility. As much as we have to help the poor to be connected and to find a donor to help them to not to be poor or not to starve. At the same time, also the other responsibility and the task is also we have to make sure that the understanding and the correct narrative are conveyed to those who are willing to help.
بەڕاستی ئەرکێکی ئاسان نییە بەڵام ناممکینیش نییە ئەوەی کە دەکرێت.
I wouldn't say this is an easy task, but I also don't believe that is impossible not to be done.
ئێمە وەکو تەجڕبەیەک لە ئیشی خۆماندا کردومانە وتوان ڕاستە کاتی ویستووە بەڵام ئێمە ئێستا متمانەیەکمان دروست کردووە کە خەڵکە دەوڵەمەندەکە ئامادەیە دەستی خەڵکە فەقیرەکەی بگرێت.
From our own experience, obviously we know the challenge and the obstacles that obviously facing this idea of connecting the needy people, the vulnerable to the people who are willing to give. It's not easy, however it's not impossible, and we have been so far successful that as we discussed, that there is a very wealth connection between them two, which is help the people who are really in need.
ئەوەی گرنگە کە لەسەر بنەمای ئاین نییە لەسەر بنەمای قەومیەت نییە لەسەر بنەمای ئینسانیەتە. ئێمە لە ئەوروپاشەوە هاوکاریمان دەکرێت لە وڵاتانی ئەفریقا لە ئاسیاشەوە هاوکاریمان دەکرێت و لە ناوخۆی خۆشمانەوە هاوکاریمان دەکرێت.
The reason I believe we have been successful so far, within a bracket is because what we have achieved so far is not based off the sectarianism. It's not a sectarian. It's not a ethnic or religious base of the project. Rather, it is based of the humanity and mankind. We have donors and sponsors from the Europe, America, in Asia, Middle East, as well as we have our own people locally, domestically also who are supporting our initiative.
ئێمە کەمترین هاوکاریمان لە حکوومەت و لە مؤسساتی UN وەرگرت.
For the project we are referring to for the growth of our humanitarian work. Sure. We haven't really been funded and supported by the local authority as well as not as huge as everybody think from the UN agency either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Clint, I'm coming to you with the same question about why we can't get governments to see the link. But I want to add another rider to the question because we've also had repeatedly people saying if the developing countries cannot fix their problem, nobody owes them anything. But a lot of the resources that are stolen from the developing countries find safe haven in the West. And so in addition to why they don't see it, that this is important, how can we also rethink our global financial policies to ensure that stolen wealth do not find protection anywhere around the world?
Yeah, so I will say, just being members of Congress back in DC, at least I can speak for there are quite certain percentage are very engaged in this topic and very interested. The reality for them is they have the attention span of a fruit fly because they are dealing with so many issues. There's constantly something else popping up and something else distracting. And it's just really hard to keep their focus on something that they don't have a huge base of support for, or they don't have financial interest like they do with the defense industry, like you talked about earlier. So that's one big key part of why it's been difficult. Sorry, just to follow, your second part of your question was just how to make sure it's being used appropriately, basically.
Yes, because, like Mousa said, Iraq can feed itself. A lot of countries can feed themselves, but that's not happening.
Yes.
Because these resources are being mismanaged. And a lot of those resources find their ways to the Western countries, in the banks. And how do we justify keeping a safe haven for this loot and still condemn countries for not addressing poverty? What role can we play to ensure that these resources do not find safe havens anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to having policies in place that help protect that. I think when you talk about loot, it can be difficult because there's the illegal official loot I'm assuming you're referring to versus the underground loot. And part of it is, a lot of it comes down to the countries themselves to have those systems in place. And I know that isn't always easy if you don't have a government that is structurally set up to operate in its best interest of the people. So that one, I don't have a great answer, I guess is the honest answer of what would work best there.
No, thank you very much. Heidi, I come to you. And I want to push a little bit. The responsibility to end poverty, according to Mousa, is everyone's. But I've not heard a lot about private sector, their role, and what they can do to help. I recall that when there was apartheid in South Africa, one of the things that helped to end apartheid in South Africa was the role the private sector played in saying, we're not going to do business with you because of what you're doing. And that level of economic pressure helped, in addition to other things, to move the needle in South Africa. Do you see a similar role for private sector in ensuring that countries actually live up to the obligation of providing prosperity for all and ending poverty across the world?
Thank you for that question. I believe very strongly in public-private partnerships. And I think with what we've witnessed in our country quite recently, this is an opportunity. We have to build bridges together. We cannot give up. In the case of Afghanistan, we had public-private partnerships for the past 20 years. I managed, as CEO of Roots of Peace, $200 million from USAID. We planted 8 million fruit trees in all 34 provinces. And you have to then take that fruit and bring it to market. Now, people were the traders and buyers, the buyers in India, the buyers in Dubai were very afraid, of course, to go to Afghanistan for security reasons. So we created an innovative concept of bringing the traders to the buyers at Gulf Food in Dubai. And they were introduced to what they used to call the Kabuli Wallas, the trade that through the Silk Road of these beautiful fruits in a country most people don't even realize. Afghanistan is 80% dependent upon agriculture for jobs. It was once called the Garden of Central Asia. So we partnered with these supermarkets, Big Bazaar and Reliance. We took ag exports from 2014 from $250 million to $1.4 billion. Now that money went back into the community and they were incented to grow licit crops, high value crops. And when local communities have the money, they will invest in education. They'll invest in their children. When you don't have money, that's when you go to ISIS. You go to alternative, nefarious players in the region if you don't have the ability to feed your family. So this is a sense, I think, right now of just tremendous urgency. I will go back to my respective location to San Francisco. And I'm going to the Silicon Valley. We launched a program here, and the leaders of Google, of Facebook, of LinkedIn are all headquartered there. I'm going to go with a passionate message from the World Forum on how we need to lead a social media campaign. If we can do an ice bucket challenge around the world and get everybody excited to make a difference, we have to call upon the world to plant peace through agriculture now. I think it can go viral. I think we just have to have the imagination. People are frozen in a sense of apathy. We see wars, we're desensitized to the escalating wars that continue throughout the world. So when I do say landmines, it's symbolic of the seeds of hatred that only sown in the soil, but the soul of humanity. And I think we need to, as humanity, demine the soil, demine our hearts, and demine our minds, and fill it with something that we rarely talk about as humans, and that is with love. Love in our hearts, regardless of the color of our hand, the politics in our mind. When a seed is planted, as it has been for thousands of years, that seed will grow and will feed future generations and restore the lungs of Mother Earth so that we can fight this climate crisis. It's the 80th anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco, June 26, 1945. Following the atrocities of World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt never wanted to see a World War III. Well, I think this is a moment in time this spring to really to remind people of history of people who were optimistic about a United Nations, optimistic about a future with taking down a Berlin Wall, which we witnessed in our lifetime. And I think for future generations, the innovation of the World Forum, the people who are gathered here, the diplomats, the dignitaries, and the visionary in the back of the room, who I thank so much for this opportunity. We will do whatever we can to go back to our respective communities and plant peace through agriculture across the world.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up from the audience. Questions, reactions, disagreements. Please.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for your kind vision and for sharing your understanding about the issue. My name is Henry. Before I come to Berlin, I worked in Tanzania for 2 years for a grassroots NGO related to environment, climate change, and disaster management. But being a grassroots NGO also means we have very limited resources, and it has been very, very difficult for us to seek funding, to seek support. However, as we are seeing that USAID has been drastically being shutting down and drastically losing funding all over the world. Where's the future of the grassroots NGO? Where is the future for the grassroots for the people who are working in the grassroots to seeking the support, whether it's financially or from a resource perspective? Where do you see the future goes? Thank you.
Who wanna take that?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Well, I'm living this right now. I'll be very honest. I started working in Afghanistan Roots of Peace in 2002, and despite many, many challenges, regime changes, we are the longest continuously operating NGO in Afghanistan. On the 31st of January, we got an email that I had to fire 200 of our employees who worked for a woman-led NGO for 20 years. That weighs so heavily on my heart, but I'm not giving up. I'm looking to alternatives. When I was in Abu Dhabi, I spoke with the Red Crescent. I have meetings next week when I go home to San Francisco with the European Union. And again, I'm going to go to the Silicon Valley with a passion. Why do we need to care about Afghanistan? Why do we need to care about Kurdistan, Vietnam? Because we are humans. And we do not leave this earth. I will do whatever I can to take out even one landmine is an opportunity for a seed of life to grow, to feed the future, and beyond politics, beyond religion. This is human. This is the human capacity. And again, the World Forum in the heart of Berlin right now, we can see how peace is possible. The city has demonstrated it to the world. I think we need to deploy back. And I'll tell you, it's scary. It's scary. But I feel very responsible. But you have to be optimistic in this world. And you never, never, never give up.
Thank you. Mousa.
جارێکی تریش باس لە ئەو تأکید لەسەر مەوضوع پشت بەخۆ بەستن دەکەمەوە کە باسی کرد جەنابی.
Yeah, I just want to really emphasize that the self-belief of ourselves.
هەر ئینسانێک چێژێکی زۆر تایبەت وەردەگرێت لە بەخشین. ئەوەی کە دەبەخشێت.
And I believe that's a human nature. Every human being is the donors who give. It's a very pleasurable, and then there is a connected to their soul.
ئێمە هەمیشە قسەیەکمان کردووە کە ئینسان دوو بەشە، بەشێکی جەسەدەکەیەتی بەشێکی ڕوحەکەیەتی.
Obviously, we believe that a human being is made up of two different component parts, which is one is the physical part, other one is the soul of the human being.
چۆن جەسەدەکە پێویستی بە خۆراک هەیە، ئەبێ خۆراکی بەردەوام پێ بدەێت، ڕوحەکەش پێویستی بە خۆراک هەیە. ئەوە خۆراکی ڕوحە کە تو ئاور لە خەڵکێک دەدەیەوە، ئەگەر ژینگە بێ، ئەگەر ئاژەڵ بێ، ئەگەر ئینسان بێ، ئەگەر هەر یەکێک لەو شتانە.
So the physical part of the human being is require obviously the substance of food and nutrition to survive, and then at the same time we believe the soul of a human being also require another nutrition, which is either is giving financial aid to the needy people, or whether you are protecting the humanity or environmental protection, or being an animal level. All this is a seed and the food for the soul to survive and then to renew itself.
زۆر گرنگە ئێمە ئیستثماری ئەوە بکەین، لە سینەمادا ئیستثمار بکەین، لە هونەردا، لە پلاتفۆرمی لەو شێوەیەدا، لە بابەتی زانستیدا ئیبرازی ئەو خەڵکە بکەین، ئیبرازی کاری خێرخوازی بکەین بۆی وەکو هاندانێکی لێبێت. فیستیڤالی بۆ دادنەی، هەدیەی گەورەی بۆ دادنەی، چالاکی جۆرا و جۆری لە پێش ئەوە دەکەی بۆ ئەوەی ئەو خەڵکەی کە دەبەخشێت زیاتر ئەو ڕۆحەی تێدا بەهێزتر بێت، زیاتر چێژی لێ وەربگرێت.
And I believe now more than any other time is very important to make effort in a academic, in a cinematic, or through the festivals, through the public arena, whatever avenue is possible, to reconnect the people who are willing to give to the people who are really required to receive. Because the more we talk about, the more we promote the idea, the more people will come to understanding and then accept the concept. So the concept needs a thorough and continuous of a conversation and promotion by various different agencies and throughout the world to make the idea of a humankind and humanitarian to survive and to continue to renew itself.
ئێمە تەجروبەمان هەبووە، هەڵمەتی کۆکردنەوەی هاوکاریمان دەست پێ کردووە، شتێکی زۆر کەممان وەرگرتووە. بەڵام بە ماندیبوون بە زەحمەت ئیترمان دوای چەند ساڵێک کردووە ئەو هاوکاریە بڵێم سەد قاتی ئەو هاوکاریە بووە کە جاری کردومانە بەس کۆڵمان نەداوە.
We have a very first-hand experience about this. Always it's not the case. Sometimes at the beginning we try to promote the idea of obviously a public donation for a particular crisis or particular event where the humanitarian crisis was occurred. We have not been successful, and we receive a minimum of amount of need and cash or financial aid to provide the necessity for those people who were depending on us at the time. But through the continuation of our effort and promoting the idea of the people are once and then they can be part of each other, and later we obviously the same event and the same case we have received actually 100 times more than what we initially received. So I mean, the more we do, the more that can be really achieved.
نازانم کاتم چۆن هەیە بەس ئەگەر ئاخیر قسە بکەم ئێمە بە تەجروبە حکوومەت مؤسساتی هەبووە بۆ نمونە لە کوێت بیت زکات هەیە لە کۆکردنەوەی زکات کەوە بنەمایەکی شەرعیە لە ئیسلامدا دەبێ بدەیت بەڵام نەیتوانیوە ئەو هاوکاریە زۆرە کۆ بکەتەوە بەس خەڵک کە بە جودا دەستیان پێ کردووە توانیتوانە هاوکاری زۆر گەورەتر لەوە بکەنەوە کۆ بکەنەوە.
I don't know how much time I have, but I want to finalize it. Give you an example. Let's say Kuwait is a very prosperous country where they have their own what they call a zakat foundation. Zakat is an Islamic taxation that every Muslim is supposed to be give every year, whatever they have or from their revenue and saving. Initially, because it's go through the institutional government, they were not very successful. But then when the public went behind it, and then public gathered together to behind the same project. There was a lot of money, and then obviously the project was by far was the most successful because of the public support for it.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? Okay, first you, and then I'll take the 2 comments and then give the panelists one final round of response, and then we'll wrap up because we are. So
my name is Francesco Timiani. I'm a student at the Hershey School here. I have a very simple question of how, given all this conversation we're having and all the ways we look to eradicate extreme poverty, my question is based off the timeline set at the panel to end it by 2030. What are the realistic ways we can do that within 5 years? When I first read 2030, I thought in my head, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. But it occurred to me right before I set foot in that this would be 5 years. So how realistic is it to end extreme poverty in 5 years, and what massive changes would we need to be done at the policy level in order to accomplish anything close to that timeline?
thank you. Let me take your question, then we'll come back to the panel.
My question is directed to Ms. Yala. I'm Ashna from Barzan Church Foundation. I have been working with refugees, serving refugees for 3 years. I'm a camp manager. So really, I'm impressed by your speech and what you are doing. Really, I'm happy to have a woman, to see a woman like you. But my question is that, so do you think that, the deadline was 2030? So do you think that how much you have mentioned a scary number by, like the whole world has a diminished place, and it's like a high average of land has been followed with mine. Do you think by at the end of 2030, how much percentage, if you had the support and collaboration from the people around you or your country, how much of this land would be diminished? Is it possible to answer this question? Because you are so optimistic and you make us so happy.
Well, I think we need an army of peacekeepers right now. And I think our collective focus, we can analyze where these landmines are, and we can use the tools of AI. I think if we work with the companies to help us to find the infrared locations where they are and take the front line of peace, it's extremely expensive and it's labor intensive. But you have to go inch by inch. And just imagine if we held a camera and a light to seeing each one of these red dots around the world being eradicated and the green dots of fertility being planted. I think we need to have that type of visual inspiration for the youth, because the youth is watching this around the world. They're seeing darkness and the lack of solutions. I know that in my country, in the United States, and I see that around the world. We, as the elders, need to be the change in the world. And I do believe it is possible. It's going to be extremely expensive, but it's extremely doable. And it's just it's the business of peace, the economics of peace. We have to sell this to the corporations to invest, as well as the governments, with matching funds. And country by country, again, I want to end it, 110 million landmines in 60 countries. Since we invented landmines during the Civil War in the 1860s in the United States, we have managed to plant seeds of hatred in the soil and soul of humanity. We have the capacity to get it out. The 18th Sustainable Development Goal, let's go back to San Francisco and remind them of the charter. And as humans, we forget things sometimes. Forgot the 18th. But I think we can put the world on par. Par is a golf game. We can have fundraisers. I mean, we need to use our imagination for peace, and not destructive mentality for war.
Thank you. So, Clint, what do we do to make 2030 possible?
So to be frank, it's not possible, in my opinion, at this point, right? So if you'd asked me a year ago, it would have been potentially within reach. With the current administration in the White House, and the drastic, just insane cuts they're doing that are also illegal in my country, I will also point that out. It's going through the courts right now, but it's completely illegal what they've done, how they've made massive cuts to USAID. That's the bad news. And this kind of curtails to the earlier question, what can we do? We really got to get political, right? So all of us who care about global humanitarian issues, we need to really start getting more politically engaged. We're seeing it now. All these wonderful NGOs that do absolutely wonderful work. A lot of them, UN agencies, they got a lot of funding from different governments. And as that funding is getting cut, all of a sudden you're seeing massive layoffs of staff, massive, millions more people getting kicked back into poverty. So we got to get more politically engaged. We got to get more politically active. My organization, we've done work around Gaza, and we've been bringing doctors who had worked and treated patients out, American doctors that treated patients in Gaza, and we were bringing them to Capitol Hill and having them meet with members of Congress. Because in the U.S., our media coverage is not always very, it doesn't get a full picture of what's going on the ground, and we don't have, Israel hasn't allowed journalists on the ground there in Gaza. So it's important to get people who've actually been on the ground who can speak to members of Congress and say what they're seeing there on the ground. And that's a lot for the doctors. A lot of them is outside their scope of what they're normally comfortable with. But I will say it has a pretty huge impact, and it really, we just gotta get political. And one thing we heard a lot on the Gaza issue in particular, there's a lot of money raised to go to helping people in Gaza on the humanitarian front, but the policies of the U.S. to keep sending weapons while people are being bombed, and that comes down to policy. So a lot of this stuff, you kind of full circle what he mentioned earlier. We gotta get more political in terms of how we address humanitarian issues, because all these issues really do come down to policies created, wars created, and then things along those lines. So.
Thank you. Mousa, what do we do to make 2030 a reality?
بەداخەوە کە منیش هاوڕامە لەگەڵی کە ممکن نییە لە ئەو 2030 بتوانین ئەو کێشەیە چارەسەر.
Unfortunately, I agree with you that it's likely impossible to achieve the goal by 2030 to eradicate poverty.
بەڵام هەر گرنگیشە ئێمە ئەو هیوالە دەست نەدەین و ئیش بکەین لەسەر ئەو بابەتە.
But despite of that, it's very, very important for us not to give up our hope, and then we have to continue fight to make that possible.
پێشکەوتنی باش هەبوونە دەکرێت ئەوانە کۆپی بکرێن لەو شوێنانەی کە ئەو کێشیان تێدا بەرفرەوان.
There has been a lot of successful and positive progress in the past in the various different parts of the world. This module can be copied and then be used in other parts of the world where is needed.
هەرچەندە ئەوەی ئەمڕۆ هەیە بەتایبەتیش لایانی شەڕکە تێدا بەهێزە دڵخۆشکردنیە، بەڵام ئەوانە لە ئانووساتیشدان ئەکرێ بگۆڕدرێن و ئەکرێ ئیشێکی تر بکرێتن بۆ ئاشتکردنەوە.
Currently, the picture is a very gleam. The war is raging in every region. Can also be possible to change dramatically. Instead of the fight, the peace can be achieved, and peace initiative can be really achieved in every corner of the world.
لە هەموو گرنگتر ئەوەیە کە ئێمە ئەو هەستە لە مرۆڤەکاندا بە شێوەیەکی گشتی زیاتر بگەین کە ئیش لەسەر ئەو بابەتە.
But it's more above all and very important that the feeling that we have for the humanity can also be transferred and transparent to every human being, and then to have the feeling of that all the time.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been quite a conversation, and of course we can't resolve the questions about poverty in 1 hour. But I want to leave you with some words from what we've discussed here. It is really clear that poverty is a human construct. It is not something that is natural to humankind. And if we constructed it, we can deconstruct it. And so the starting point is to go away from this conversation with that understanding that this is a human problem that can actually have a human solution. And for that solution to work, we have to approach the problem of poverty as a collective. There are no country-level solutions to poverty because poverty does not respect borders. And so this current insular behavior of countries across the world as a way of making themselves better or making themselves great will not work because poverty does not respect borders. It also means that there's some level of responsibility for each and every one of us. Just like Mousa mentioned, it starts with you in your own community as a voter, the kind of people you're getting into power. as a voter, how you hold government responsible. And for countries, whether you're in the West, you're in this global South, or you're in the global North, you have a responsibility. Wealthier nations need to do more. And the countries that are not wealthy need to clean up their acts, because the solution is not one-sided. There's nobody who has to pay for us to get out of poverty. We all have to pay. And if there's any future for the generation yet unborn, or even any chance of stability for us in this our time, we have to address poverty. We have to address conflict. You can't fight poverty when you're in conflict. And so peace is important. Collaboration is important. Common humanity, because we are all intrinsically intertwined in one humanity. And if we're going to sink, we're sinking together. If we're going to survive, we're going to survive together. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention and I wish you a pleasant evening.